I've always been pro-business, still am pro-business. So, and I think that's a kind of a conservative view, but there is a line when corporations become crony capitalism instead of capitalism, when there's no competition, where they have eliminated or bought the competition through either muscle or just overpowering in money or lobbying or whatever, because they have so much power. When you get to that point, you no longer have capitalism in any sense. You just have the elite class, and nobody else can compete.
And that's exactly what we've got in the meatpacking industry right now.
Right, and in the drug industry.
Oh yeah, worse than the drug industry.
Yeah.
But it's coming back to haunt veterinary medicine too, and that is that there's only like 5 corporations that are making any veterinary products anymore.
I've noticed that what I've noticed is that I can't buy any of the stuff anymore. I have to go to a vet.
Well, that's
somewhere.
that effort to try to reduce antibiotic use. They're running them through veterinarians to be prescription only, things that were over the counter before. And I personally don't think that has much of an impact, to be honest with you, because most of those products, they're good for pretty much like LA200. You got a cow with a sore foot. Man, it works great.
Yep.
But you get a calf that's in a feed yard, 700 miles on a truck, LA200 is probably of not much value anymore.
Okay.
And so I don't know what good they did with that. They were trying to prevent extra use and unauthorized use so that, we'd have less antibiotic resistance. But when you're using 50 times, 100 times more than that on one potload of calves getting off in a truck in Kansas out of Montana that didn't need it, that's all out the window anyway.
Right.
In my opinion.
And that's not going to change that.
No.
To a vet's not going to change that.
Well, they've already got their veterinarians are all in the loop anyway. And there's some veterinarians that are so involved with that kind of stuff, they really don't charge much to go out and visit a feedlot on their sickness because they're getting all the coupons from the pharmaceutical industries for supplying that antibiotic to that feedlot.
Okay.
I mean, and I just hated that with a passion. And I tell my suppliers, I'm not interested in the rebates.
I see.
Give it to me as cheap as you can right now, and if I want it, I'll take it. Otherwise, I'm not interested.
Right.
But a lot of them, boy, they make a fortune on the rebates.
Right.
And I don't see how that's helpful. And maybe I'll be, strung up here if this gets out, know. But
But it is. It's about money, and we don't really realize where the money is going. I mean, you wouldn't know that when you get to that level where there's billions being thrown around. There's also the risk of losing because you have so much control. So when somebody comes in and starts to mess with your profit or something, you're going to use those billions to protect your billions of dollars in profit and your power.
Well, that's kind of like Mike has said, let's say you get something that's really kind of working, and the reason it's working is because you kind of have an exclusive on it. And but if it gets too good, the big guys are coming in. And they'll stomp you, squash you like you can't believe.
Because they can undercut you on price.
Oh,
they can force you out of the market by strong arm tactics, like in the hide industry. That's one of the things he was talking about. So any smaller packers are the ones who take the cows that are fat out of the feedlot and they butcher them and then sell them to retailers.
Right.
Any smaller outfit can't really sell hides because the hide buyers are told by the big packers that if you buy from that guy, then you can't have my hides, and that's where they get all their hides from. So they're pretty much eliminating competition in that market just by market power. And how do you compete with that? You can't.
Well, obviously, what we need,
or you have to find a way to sell the hides yourself.
To me, that's kind of what can we do with them? Some people have tried making pet food out of them, and they do kind of work, except for sometimes dogs will eat something that's so non-digestible, then they have to go and have an incision and get the damn thing cleaned out of their gut.
I see.
And so that kind of eliminates a little bit on hides. But theoretically, that's what our land grant university should be doing, is helping us solve these problems
Right.
by creating solutions to the problem. What do you do with the hide? And hides are difficult to compost. You
Yep.
know, they take longer. The hair doesn't want to disappear necessarily, and so, you know, it's a tough deal. And so, yeah, these smaller plants have a hell of a time because they can get kind of backed up just by hide storage. You know what I mean?
And any of the extra stuff,
Yeah.
they don't know where to go with it. They don't have any way to add any value or value add any of the other products because the market for them is kind of tied up.
It truly is tied up, and
Yeah.
and so I don't even know what these little plants are doing with hides. I guess probably landfill.
I think so because there's nothing they can't sell them.
Right.
I talked to a couple and they're just like we can't. In fact, one of them, he was talking about that. Like they had a deal with a hide buyer wanted to buy his hides and then he had to back out because he's like, I'm going to lose my contract.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you get into that, but I think there's opportunity in something like this, but it takes people who want to, with real integrity, who want to buy and keep things local and find ways, new ways to sell something, but you're going to have to make it profitable. If it, people have these altruistic views from outside, like a city person, like, well, just nobody sell to the big packers. Well, that isn't really, if you want us all to go out of business, that we could do that because there isn't anywhere to go with it right now.
Yep.
And then we set up these packers, and that's actually not the fix to the problem because all the small packers have nowhere to sell the meat.
Right.
You have the big packers have direct contracts with multi-billion-dollar companies like Walmart and Albertsons and things like that. They aren't going to buy from a small packer.
No.
So, and that's where everybody gets their food now. So you actually have to fix both of those problems.
And the only way, in my mind, you can consistently do it is you got to be able to produce higher quality than they can.
Because you can't beat them on volume.
No. And volume is low cost. I mean, low cost meat basically to them.
Right.
And,
Cheaper meat. Yep.
and that's one of the things too, is that how much do we allow them to like bring meat in from south of the border?
Right. Brazil.
Buy a little bit of American raised tallow and throw it back into a package and call it a product to the United States.
It happens all the time.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like years ago when I was at Padlock, Dan Scott liked to feed cattle. He'd bring me in even though I wasn't the livestock manager, I was just the veterinarian. He'd go, Doc, why don't you look at my kill sheets? And so I'd go through them and I'd pull out the premium choices and the primes and that kind of thing and look at our numbers where we were and they were doing a good job as far as hitting above choice and that sort of thing. And they were basically a three-way cross of not the highest quality Angus, or primarily Red Angus, Hereford, and Shorthorn, but because they had maximum heterosis from the three-way crossing system, they were still as competitive as going and buying a $20,000 Angus bull in the day. I mean,
okay.
we made up the difference maybe in individual performance by herd performance being better because of the heterosis. And so it was kind of a neat deal. But what I was going to say is when I was there, and before I even came, now they had a veterinarian there before, they had gotten it down to their death loss was less than 0.5% a year, and we were pulling primarily for like respiratory disease, probably 15 or 20% of the calves had to be treated.
Okay.
You compare that to the big yards that were in this, discussion, this BRD symposium, we're up to about 25% of the cattle need to be pulled at some time. And a lot of these cattle have already been mass medicated.
So I mean, pulled out of the
pen and treated,
with something.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because of the concentrations, and I mean,
whatever it is.
Well, you just can't. You can't keep everything healthy when you're shoving that many together in a
tight spot
in a non-natural environment too. So.
Well, anyway, and the death loss in these yards is now upwards of like 2% and maybe 3%.
Wow.
versus 0.5%. Okay, and so what do you attribute that to? Well, the padlock basically was like 11 individual ranches that were all run under one management.
Okay.
That's kind of the way it was. I mean, the way it was scattered out.
Yeah.
And so we
they had the ranch manager here, ranch manager there,
yeah.
and one manager overall.
And we'd have cattle on a truck 2 hours from where they were weaned, getting in to being processed. So it wasn't anything like going clear to Colorado, but there was still stress there. And the cattle they would come into contact with at the feed yard were cattle that were maybe from east of Sheridan, often one of their properties. So I mean, it wasn't like they were just all commingled all the time and none of that. We had some of it, and yet our performance as far as health was way better than what's going on today with, like I said before, poor antibiotics, poor vaccines, and better results. Well, why? Well, part of it is we optimize that heterosis, where a lot of ranches anymore, we're just Angus. We're not crossbreeding anymore. It's just Angus.
Right.
Well,
So explain what the benefit of heterosis is then.
Well, heterosis is a concept of genes in the way they're inherited. And you have genes that some of them are what they call lethal. In other words, if they're little h, just as a denominator, as opposed to a capital H and a small h.
Okay.
The capital H, small h, for whatever, are generally going to be more robust and meet the environment than either of the other two, the big H, or little h. And so that's the basics of heterosis. Is heterosis keeps more of those genes mixed up. And so they're both being expressed, but it's not like
More genetic diversity
than say if it was just straight little h.
all the time.
Yeah.
So you're just breeding little h to little h to little h to
Right.
little h to little.
And-
so you're
and that's-
throwing in a different
Right.
combination of genes
Right.
from outside, like
Right.
with a different breed of cattle or something.
Right.
Okay.
And see, we've gone away from that. And everybody, I mean, you can't believe how people that 30 years ago were Hereford and then Hereford Angus, now they're straight Angus.
Well, thanks for joining me for this video. This is part of a larger series, so if you want to watch the next video, make sure you click on it right here. Until next time, I'm Trinity Vandenaker. God bless.